As you may notice, I've had a change of jewelry. Care of the First Lady of Afghanistan. Pretty stunning. Is there a story?
Huh?
Is there a story made by a wonderful woman?
Probably, but I don't know it.
So, Rula, you and I we were on stage together in 2015 at CSIS, which is a foreign policy think tank in Washington. And at the time, things were happening. You were actually relatively new to the job. And you were just kind of making your way as a first lady, and you told me later that this was one of your first sort of coming out. You know, you were actually being outspoken. Here's why it's especially notable how outspoken this first lady is. She's Lebanese Christian in a country that is 99% Muslim. You met your husband at American University in Beirut.
That's correct.
The head of Afghanistan. And you did not settle back in Afghanistan because of the Soviet occupation first, and then the Taliban. So it took you, but you did come back, what, 2002?
Yes.
But you have this long history in the United States. You raised your children there. You got your master's in journalism from Columbia University. So you have a very unique background as a First Lady of Afghanistan. How difficult was that to be accepted by the population?
Well, I did leave when we first got married in '75. I'm going to show my age. I just celebrated my 70th.
Happy birthday.
So, thank you. So basically, the question was?
The acceptance.
Oh, acceptance.
And your acceptance
yeah.
even now. You were talking earlier about when you make progress, there's people who try to take you down a peg. But how did you gain acceptance as this tiny minority person in Afghanistan, of a tiny minority?
Well, what I was trying to say, what I was actually saying is that when we got married in '75, I came and lived in Afghanistan, actually with my in-laws. And I had 3-4 years where I really learned and discovered what Afghanistan was, what family life was. And lo and behold, I realized that it was pretty much what my grandmother used to talk to me about in Lebanon. So it was not very far from, I mean, the customs, the traditions are not very far from the Lebanese traditions. And so I felt very comfortable. The question of religion never rose. You know, in the Holy Quran, you are entitled to marry somebody from the book. And so I'm people of the book, Christian, Jewish. So I was a novelty for about a week. And then after a week, the whole family just kind of accepted me, and I was part of the decor.
And has it been a problem as First Lady, though?
As a First Lady, it's a problem in as much as people who want to create trouble will pick on that, but very few people do.
So you talk about the Western misconceptions of women in Afghanistan as we focus on Afghan women as being oppressed and repressed.
I think it's unfortunately, it's something that's created by international aid agencies who need to raise funds to be able to function. I don't know, very quickly, you have the countries, the donor countries that say, oh, we're going to help this country. And then you have the country that's going to receive the funds. But in between, you have international aid agencies that are all competing for all these funds. And then they run like a business, rather sloppily. I think as businesswomen, you'd find them not to be very, very strict or very accountable. And so they need every year to go back to get funds. So they need to create this atmosphere. Oh, but the Afghan women, we really need to help them. They are in the corner. They are, if we're not there, they'll not survive. You know, all this kind of things. Whereas actually, yes, we need to help Afghan women, but we need to help them because actually they're extremely resilient, persistent, they really work hard, and with all this difficult situation they have, they manage to carry on, they manage to keep their families together, they manage to do a very good job. So
So you found great spirit.
Yes.
As our Afghan.
So actually, yes, I wanted from the start already in 2015 to change the narrative about Afghan women. And I think it was extremely important for those women because you are a little bit what other people see you to be. And so for them, they felt, oh, okay, we must be really, they're saying we are bad, we're in bad situation, we cannot do anything. Actually, they're very resourceful. They really know how to put things together with very little money. They can really do a lot. And basically, by trying to change the narrative, you unleash their power.
So you hold up your finger. You have ink on your finger because you voted last week in parliamentary elections. And
not much left, but it's still there.
And we'll show some pictures now of women voting in Afghanistan on our screens. Tell us how important that election is to the women of Afghanistan. It's
extremely important. We had, I think, I'm not really quite sure how many seats there are in the parliament, but there are about 67 seats that are dedicated for women. And we had 400 candidates, 400 women candidates. So that is wonderful. A lot of them were young. A lot of them want change. You see them standing in line here. They stood in line for very long. They were very patient. Everything went very well in that election, but for the Electoral Commission, I mean, they were very disorganized. So, but the women,
there's some violence, but
very little.
But very little. Okay.
I mean, there was one place after the polls were closed, there was a bomb, and 15 people died, unfortunately. But it's not really like it disrupted the election. What I wanted to say is that the anecdote is that at one center, we have centers for women and centers for men. And at one center, they arrived and the doors were closed. And there was on Facebook, there was a kind of little video of the women banging on the door saying, open the door, we want to vote, open the door. It was really, I mean, everybody just kind of relayed that video. It was.
So you just had your 70th birthday, as you said. Your husband is up for re-election in next April. So you're thinking a bit about legacy. Share with everyone here what you described to me were two legacy projects that have helped women and entrepreneurs in Afghanistan.
One is not very tangible, but basically women were invisible. When I first went back in 2002, women were what in the media they call burqa, but actually in Afghanistan we call them chaderi, these kind of blue with a little embroidered window to see through. And everywhere you walked, you saw some women, and usually they would walk very close to the wall and very furtively they would go. So they were really invisible, and you didn't find them in places of work, you didn't find them in the government or anywhere. Well, today they are visible. They are there, they work with purpose, they will have their little scarf on their head, but they are moving around. You find them, as you mentioned, as actually Mr. Mari mentioned, we have 6 women became ministers during these past 4 years. Today we have 11 women who are deputy ministers in all sorts of ministries. I mean, of course, we have a ministry for women's affairs, but we have Ministry of Mine. We have a minister there that is a woman. The counter-narcotics, we have a women ministry right now. And we have in every ministry, we have a deputy minister that is a woman.
And you've contributed, though, yourself personally to a university for women. and these symposiums where you've brought women together to talk about women in Afghan society and how to be part of the peace initiative. You've brought that to the country.
Yeah, I inaugurate a lot of things. Among others, I inaugurated this Women University, which was a private undertaking. But, you know, I was for it. I had spoken very clearly that women that came from a very traditional background should be allowed the possibility of having access to higher education. And that would not have happened. We have a lot of universities that are co-ed, but they needed this university for women. So I was very happy to inaugurate it. Among the things that I've helped create is the Afghan Cancer Foundation. There is a center for, we call it the Hope Center for treating addicts, drug addicts. I have encouraged a group of women entrepreneurs they were complaining, they came to visit me, and during the visit they were talking, they complained about not being respected in the chambers of commerce, that, you know, they pay their fees and everything and they never get invited to events. So I said, well, why don't you create your own chamber of commerce? And a few months later, they did. And I did give just a little push because they needed to submit that to the Higher Economic Council, and they were never being put on the agenda. So after 4 months of trying, they came and saw me and said, this is a problem. Well, I happen to know the president, so.
That worked.
He told me, well, there is a meeting in 2 days, tell them to be there, and it happened.
So please get a question ready, anybody from the audience, while I ask this question. Reading about what's going on in Afghanistan security-wise, which, by the way, is the longest-running U.S. war in American history, it seems it has been described as a very uncertain environment with a lot of security risk. There are some who would say things are more dangerous than they ever have been, and of course we see a lot of Taliban attacks that are quite deadly. Spreading in the country, but you have a different take on this, which is fascinating. Share that.
Unfortunately, there are people that benefit from war. And when there is a government that comes and starts working for peace, they try to discredit that government. So there is a lot of negative media. There are a lot of false realities that are being conveyed in the media. Afghanistan is a place where you can live a normal life, and from time to time there might be an explosion somewhere. Kabul is has 6 million inhabitants, so it's a large city. And there is an explosion, everybody gets upset for 2 days, and then life goes on. So it's not like we live in a state of war, but we live in a state of uncertainty and insecurity. And that people are really very tired of. And I've heard so many groups coming and telling me, oh, if we could have some security, then we could do this, then we could do that. And so already in 2017, I tried to talk about that. And then we had a symposium where I gathered some I find gathering women a very good tool because it helps them network, it helps them discuss one topic. And the topic we discussed in that particular symposium was how women can become messengers of peace, because peace starts at home. And we are a society where there's a lot of violence. We've lived through 30, 40 years of conflict, and people in conflict, you know, in war, you kind of lose a sense of right and wrong. You are in kind of a mode of survival. You'll do anything so that you can survive, even if that means you're going to hurt somebody around you, even if it means you're going to kill that person, destroy their house, or whatever. So we need to get out of this mentality of war and create more, go back to what we used to be. So this is where I go and dig in our local traditions. And I was fortunate to get married in '75, so I knew what Afghanistan was before, and it was a lovely, peaceful country where there were some, you know, there are frictions everywhere, but there were mechanisms to resolve small conflicts or family issues or things of this sort. And actually, you've heard of shuras and jirgas. These are councils of people that sit together and will sit until they reach a consensus on a certain issue. So negotiation was not something new to Afghanistan, but we just had forgotten it through so many years of war. So that symposium, we did have one day of a workshop to help the women learn how to do conflict resolution, how to know how, if you say this thing, what is the consequence of? What is the consequence of allowing your daughter to be married in young age and a forced marriage? That means that down the road, forced marriages, you know, usually after 15, 20 years, there are problems. That means the two families are going to fight. This family is going to say, oh, your daughter came, she didn't know anything, she didn't know how to cook, she didn't know how to take care of the house. Of course, she was like 10, 12 years old, how would she know? And then the other family would say, well, but your son was terrible, he didn't know how to take care of her. I mean, and then it starts and becomes a feud, and the feud gets to be even more. So we did that, and what we're finding, you know that we have had an initiative, the government has had an initiative of trying to speak to the Taliban to kind of stop all this nonsense. And my husband declared a ceasefire at some point, and it was accepted from the Taliban for 3 days. And they came into our cities. And lo and behold, everybody was very happy. Both the people, they welcomed them, although they have a lot of grief because they have suffered from the absurdity of this kind of insurgency, ongoing insurgency. But also the Taliban and what they, I mean, an anecdote, what the Taliban wanted to, I mean, most of them, they're young people, they wanted to know where they could find ice cream. This was the thing they were most interested in finding. So we had three days where the naysayers, the people who said, oh, the Afghans are not ready to make peace, the Afghans are not ready to forgive. Well, they saw that actually the Afghans were very happy.
So Rula, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but would you just, in just a couple words, how optimistic are you about peace? Yes.
I'm very optimistic. I don't know if I will live to see it, but it will happen. Peace does not come very quickly. Peace takes as long as a war. So,
thank you so much for joining us.